As I put this out, you're either registered to vote in your local elections or you're not, the deadline being the 7th of May. If you did register, I hope you checked that opt-out box so your personal data isn't being sold to just about anyone. Imagine that, the central pillar holding our pluralistic society together, stopping us from murdering each other, and it's being monetized. And never mind about that MEP bollocks. We all know the councils and the Dáil are just glorified versions of the dole now, and Brussels being the ultimate piss-take version. If you're thinking of voting for Gemma, I'm going to quit Ireland O'Doherty, or Sargon of Cocad, I'd wager you're not doing much thinking at all. If you didn't register, I can't say anything against you. I didn't realise the gravity of last year's referendum on the so-called 8th Amendment until weeks before the ballots opened. I will say, though, that these local elections right here are of pivotal importance to our country, and even if you haven't registered to vote, there is surely at least one candidate in your ward who could use a helping hand. Oh, and the National Party aren't running anyone because, take your pick from a variety of reasons. My eyes and ears tell me it's because they did a little bit of market research and realized that they weren't going to be received like they imagined they would be. Something like how the Nazis were received when they marched into Austria. So they decided the leg work and a few £100 wasn't worth the exposure such a critical election cycle would offer them. They'd rather set up their super secret clubs all around the country. Sure, you could call that a strategy of building on your strengths and gradually building up to something, but what's that building towards? Bugger all, my discerning intellect can see. Now, that's not to say there aren't some amazing middle management leaders in the NP. I'd be the last to say something so dreadful, but wouldn't it be just amazing if those people's faces were on leaflets and posters and were personally going door to door asking about people's concerns about their communities, their country and the world? Not according to the upper management. Nah, fuck it. We can wait another 5 years, right? Or do they actually think they'll skip the locals altogether and go right into national politics? I'll leave you to ponder that for yourself and give you a nice 5 seconds of uninterrupted silence for you to do that in. There's a tendency in subcultures like the one I'm speaking to right now to avoid mixing one pot of crazy with another. But I'm a man who knows that God has a plan and it's written for anyone to observe in the stars, in the sacred art of astrology. So I won't betray myself or you, dear listener, by pretending that such a marvel of creation doesn't even exist. Between the years of 1986 and 1995, a special breed of human being was born during Pluto's transit through the sign of Sagittarius. Laughably, the New Age Blissninnies called this generation the Indigo Children, a concept rooted in a reality that once you peel back all the fluff written and said ever since its inception actually makes sense. I won't labour this broadcast with jargon, but get straight to the point. These children have now grown into adults, real adults, those who passed the 28-year mark. Anyone versed in Hebraic and Hermetic wisdom will know the significance of that, of the significance of the number 7. We have passed through hell, and this happens to be the first election in Ireland for which we are fully initiated to partake in. You've been witnessing the effects of this generation coming to consciousness all across Europe, in America's last election, and farther afield. Change, no matter how misled or false, i.e. the cult of Trump, still signifies the resentment this generation has for the state of the world. It's even being channeled by our eternal enemies into fake concerns, such as man-made climate change and veganism. But it's still there, and it's still rising. If only we would segregate our cynicism for 5 minutes and see how far we've actually come and what kind of opportunities lie ahead of us. Recognize that God has a plan, and according to His wishes, the table could be slanted to our favor in the blink of an eye, especially now that my generation have found their power. Am I saying that this current governmental structure is fit for purpose and we can change the fate of our dear island through the electoral process? Fuck no. These local elections are, or were at this rate, an opportunity to talk to our communities, understand their experiences, as well as have a constructive reason to come together as individuals, whether we be what's left of the pro-life campaign or as nationalists, gather around our chosen local candidate and forge bonds with each other, not unlike bonds forged in the foxholes of years past. These local community bonds are vital. They have the potential to transcend political life into bonds of friendship and cooperation in other areas of life where we can empower each other and eventually rule over our territory instead of being isolated agents, depending on social media to not sink into further despair, which we will, alone anyhow. If our independent and alternative candidates do get seats in the local councils, then hooray! Not only will it clear out the toads who have been sitting there for decades doing fuck all as our communities sink into third world standards as they collect their dole, but it will show the enormous number of everyday Irish people that the traditional parties can be removed and change is possible. A problem we have as communities, thinking, sure, what can you do? I'm only one person. I'll vote for this fella anyway, he seems nice enough. Maybe then, as local communities, we can start pressuring the national government for the basic essentials we've been deprived of, and then be largely rejected, leading to even more disillusionment with the national government. See, this is what the likes of the National Party and Gemma O'Doherty have failed to comprehend, or perhaps give a shit about. Maybe God can tilt the tables overnight for us, but we as His creation have to play the hands dealt to us and gradually push the wheel. As far as I can tell, the National Party just want to LARP as the Irish NSDAP, or wait for some other party to clear the way for them and install their Führer as Taoiseach. And Gemma O'Doherty, sorry to say, has already given up on Ireland and wants that sweet Brussels pension to add to her, presumably, already righteous stack of cash, so she can fuck off to some tropical paradise and leave her audience on edge without a leader. So come on guys, reach up into your midsections and pull your fucking balls back out, and find your local candidates worthy of support. Give them every spare moment that you have. I was out at the crack of dawn with mine, leafleting bumfuck nowhere, and I did some shopping before walking home. Hitchhiking my way back, a lovely countryside-orientated couple, likely early 30s, were kind enough to stop and give me a lift. I thanked them, saying that I'd been out walking all morning, and I was inevitably asked where I was walking. I informed them that I was leafleting for a candidate. I was asked who, and I had the opportunity to tell them, as well as to tell them why I loved the woman to bits. The fella said, "It's good to see fresh faces in the election." If I didn't convince this down-to-earth couple to at least look up my candidate, we at least had a discussion about ousting the toads from our local councils, who are clearly there just to collect their fucking dole. These events, these little interactions, can't be minimized by our cynical ideologies anymore. Not if we want to win some battles. Today, my candidate covered a lot of ground and met some lovely people in her ward. Without me there, she'd have met a third less of those people. It's a humbling task when you realize that your candidate has to cover a territory that can't possibly be reached by a handful of people. But the mainstream parties merely have to put Fine Gael or Fine Foil or Solidarity beside their name and call it a day. But you can't let that get you down. Realizing that your body and emotions have limits can be soul-destroying when you see how much you could have done with your day off. You can neither let that get your local independent or alternative candidate down. They're likely hurting, not only for your practical support, but your moral support. How long are we going to allow our fellow soldiers to stand up, give all their energy in one punch, only to watch from the sidelines as they have a mental fucking breakdown because they're acting alone? Rant over. I personally like what Renewa have been doing. That's the party of choice of my local candidate. I have no particular allegiance to this crowd, but it is quite handy that they have a web page dedicated to listing their local candidates and their European candidates. You can find that list at renewa.ie/candidates. If you're not going to reach out and support one of them, at least give them your number one if a suitable independent isn't already running.